Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're
Back.
doing a deep dive on a pretty hot topic, a Mars colony. Is it actually in our future? I mean, it feels like science fiction, but we've got research articles, expert opinions, and even some pretty wild plans from big names like Buzz Aldrin and Elon Musk to unpack.
Well, and what's really fascinating is that, like you said, it's not just science fiction anymore. Like, there are actual scientists and engineers who are seriously working towards this goal of a Mars colony.
I know, right? It's pretty mind-blowing. But why Mars? Like, why not the moon or somewhere? Is it really just because it's the closest planet and the most similar to Earth? Like, is that it?
Yeah, those are definitely big factors. It's the most accessible planet for us, at least for now. But the Florida Tech folks, they point out that there's even more to it than that. Like Mars, it might actually hold clues to understanding how life even begins.
Well, hold on. Are we talking about like alien life here? Like little green men running around on Mars?
Huh? Well, maybe not little green men, but potentially some kind of microbial life that maybe existed on Mars a long time ago. You see, Mars used to have a climate that was pretty similar to Earth's. So Buzz Aldrin, he actually believes that understanding Mars's climate history could even teach us something about the future of our own planet.
Okay, that's pretty wild. But what about that whole idea that Mars is like our backup plan if something catastrophic happens to Earth? Like asteroids, climate change, who knows what the future holds?
Yeah, that's definitely a driving force for a lot of people. Like, Mars could literally be humanity's insurance policy, a way to make sure that humans survive no matter what. Plus, just trying to figure out how to get to Mars and live there, it's forcing us to come up with crazy new technologies that could have huge benefits here on Earth, too.
Okay, so the why Mars question, that's pretty compelling. But I gotta say, from what I've heard, it's also like insanely expensive and dangerous. Like spacenews.com said something like $2 trillion. Is that even remotely doable?
$2 trillion. That is a crazy amount of money, you're right. But, think about it. The International Space Station, it cost way less than that. And look at what we were able to achieve. It's all about long-term investment. And with Mars, the payoff could be huge.
Okay, that's a good point. But the danger part, that still kind of freaks me out. Like, I read that the radiation levels on Mars are 8 times higher than on Earth. Isn't that the equivalent of like 24 CT scans worth of radiation just on the trip over?
Yeah, that's definitely a major concern. Like, prolonged exposure to that much radiation could lead to all sorts of problems like cancer, vision issues, and even impact brain function.
Yikes. Not exactly a great recruitment pitch for future astronauts.
Hmm.
But isn't NASA working on some ways to like protect astronauts from all that radiation?
Yeah, they are. There's a special vest called the Astrorad vest that acts as a shield against radiation. But it's not perfect, and honestly, we need a lot more research to figure out how to really mitigate those risks.
So radiation is obviously the big one.
Yeah.
But what other dangers are we talking about here? I mean, isn't there also like space sickness from zero gravity and muscle loss because of the lower gravity on Mars?
Exactly. You see, in zero gravity, it messes with your inner ear, which causes space sickness.
Uh,
Even with regular exercise, astronauts' muscles just weaken in Mars's gravity. It's like constantly fighting against your own body.
okay, starting to sound like a pretty rough vacation destination. And what about the mental toll it takes? Like being stuck in a tiny spaceship for months, millions of miles from home, that's got to do a number on your head, right?
Right. That's a huge concern, the psychological effects of being isolated and in constant danger. Imagine if you just had a simple cold or cough, and it turned into something life-threatening because you're 8 months away from any help.
Okay, so getting to Mars and surviving once you're there both sound pretty intense.
Yeah.
But are there any like bright spots? Like what is actually happening right now to try and get us closer to a Mars colony?
Actually, there's a ton happening, which is really exciting. You've got government agencies like NASA and the European Space Agency, and you've got private companies. They're all working on this.
Okay, let's start with NASA. They've got a whole bunch of robots on Mars right now, right?
Yeah.
What exactly are those robots doing?
Think of them as our scouts, paving the way for humans to eventually get there. Like, there's ExoMars, searching for signs of past life, Mavivon, studying the Martian atmosphere, and Odyssey, it's mapping the planet and looking for water ice.
So they're basically doing all the groundwork. What about those rovers? Everyone loves those.
Oh yeah, the rovers. Opportunity has actually been exploring the surface for like over 15 years, which is incredible. And then there's Curiosity, which is making some really groundbreaking discoveries.
Like what? Tell me. What's Curiosity found?
Well, Curiosity found evidence that there was water on Mars a long time ago, which means it could have been habitable back then. And it also found organic molecules. Those are the building blocks of life as we know it. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Okay, that's really cool. But it's not just robots, right? I've been hearing that the private sector is getting involved too.
Oh, absolutely. You've got SpaceX, led by Elon Musk, who's got these ambitious plans to actually colonize Mars. They've already launched the Falcon Heavy, which is the most powerful rocket we've had since the Saturn V.
Yeah, Elon Musk always pushing the limits.
Yeah.
But what about other companies? Is it just SpaceX in the running?
Not at all. You've got Going, they're building NASA's giant space launch system that's specifically designed to take astronauts deep into space. And then there's Lockheed Martin. They're working on this Mars base camp concept, which is essentially a research station that would orbit Mars.
Wait a minute. A space station around Mars. That's wild. What would they even do up there?
Well, from Mars base camp, astronauts could conduct research, control rovers on the surface, and even launch missions down to the planet. It's basically a stepping stone to having a permanent base on the surface.
Okay, now I see how this is all kind of coming together. But let's be real for a minute. A Mars colony, it still feels like something that's way out there in the future.
It's definitely a huge, massive undertaking. There's no doubt about it. But the fact that we're even having this conversation, that there's serious research and development going on, it shows how far we've come. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, we will see a Mars colony in our lifetime.
Okay, all this stuff about Mars is pretty mind-blowing. But before we move on, I've got one last question for you. With all this talk about robots and rockets, where do the listener, fit into all this? Like, are there even jobs on Mars?
That is a fantastic question. A Mars colony won't just need scientists and engineers. It's going to need all kinds of people. Think about it. Who's going to build the habitats, grow the food, make sure everyone stays healthy?
So we're talking about farmers on Mars, Martian doctors.
Exactly. Lockheed Martin has already identified 5 key jobs that'll be in high demand. Cyber architects, test technicians, software developers, radio frequency engineers, and manufacturing engineers. And that's just the start.
Wait, so you're telling me I could be a Martian software developer? That's crazy.
It's not as crazy as it sounds. And there's research happening right now that's relevant to those future Martian jobs. Like Florida Tech is working on figuring out how to grow crops in Martian soil.
So you're saying that learning about Martian farming could actually help me get a job on Mars someday?
Absolutely. And that's just one example. The stuff we're learning today will be crucial for building a sustainable future on Mars.
Okay, I'm starting to get how a Mars colony could actually work. But, all this talk about habitats and farming and stuff, it's easy to forget that there's a whole other side to this, right? The human side.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We can't just get caught up in all the technical stuff. Building a colony on Mars, it brings up some pretty big questions about, well, us.
Exactly. Do we even have the right to just go and claim another planet?
Yeah.
What if there's microbial life there that we haven't found yet? Are we going to mess up a perfectly pristine environment just by being there?
Those are really important questions. Scientists are already being super careful about sterilizing spacecraft so they don't contaminate Mars. But when you bring humans into the picture, it's a whole different ballgame. It's a debate that we're really just starting to have.
And what about who gets to go? Is it just going to be a playground for billionaires and scientists? Or will regular people have a chance? Wouldn't a Mars colony just end up with all the same problems we have here on Earth?
That's a really valid concern. Will it be a way to escape from inequality, or will that actually make things worse? It's something we need to think long and hard about as we start taking these first steps.
Yeah, it's like we're writing a whole new chapter in human history,
Yeah.
but we need to make sure it's a good one.
I like that analogy, a new chapter. And it's not just about Mars itself, it's about how this whole thing changes us. Like becoming a multi-planetary species, it can totally change how we see ourselves and our place in the universe.
Whoa, that's pretty deep. So we're talking like a spiritual awakening for all of humanity.
Yeah.
Or will it just make us more arrogant, thinking we can conquer anything?
Honestly, it could go either way. It's one of those questions that doesn't have an easy answer, but it's something we each need to think about as we consider life on Mars.
Okay, my mind is officially blown, but let's come back down to Earth for a minute. Literally. Who are these people who are actually signing up for a one-way ticket to Mars? Are they all like super geniuses and thrill seekers?
Well, it's interesting to look back at Mars One, that project that wanted to send people to Mars permanently. It didn't work out in the end, but they had over 200,000 people apply.
Wow, that many. So what were all these Mars hopefuls like? Were they all rocket scientists and astronauts?
No, actually, they came from all kinds of backgrounds. Engineers, doctors, artists, you name it. What they all had in common was this thirst for adventure. They wanted to contribute to science, and they believed that humans are meant to push boundaries.
Sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. like a cast of characters from all over the world united by this crazy dream.
Exactly. It makes you wonder what kind of society they would create it on Mars. Would it be a utopia, or would it just be a repeat of all the problems we have here on Earth?
Yeah, would they be able to make a perfect society? Or would human nature just, take over even on another planet?
It's a really interesting thought experiment. And then there's the question of just everyday life. Like, what would they eat? How would they have fun? Would they start families?
Yeah, what would they eat? I can't imagine Martian takeout being a thing.
Well, that's where human ingenuity comes in. Scientists are already working on stuff like closed-loop life support systems that recycle air and water, and they're trying to figure out how to grow crops in Martian soil.
Hold on, back up for a second. What exactly is a closed-loop life support system? So does that mean they'd be living in, like, a bubble?
It's not a bubble exactly, but it's kind of similar. Imagine a system that constantly recycles everything, like air, water, even waste. Nothing gets wasted. It's a pretty amazing idea.
Wow, okay. So it sounds like living on Mars would constantly push the limits of human ingenuity. But it also sounds kind of boring. What would people even do for fun?
It would definitely require a pioneering spirit and a pretty high tolerance for, well, a lot of red dust. But boring. I don't think so. Imagine the art they could create, the music, the new sports they would invent.
Okay, I could totally see it now. Martian baseball played in low gravity.
See, exactly. It would be such a unique environment that I think it would spark all kinds of creativity and innovation.
But let's get real for a second. All of this is about more than just surviving, right? There's got to be a bigger goal for sending people to Mars. What's the end game?
Well, yeah, it's about making sure humanity survives, but it goes way beyond that. I mean, imagine the scientific breakthroughs that could come from studying Mars, its geology, its atmosphere, maybe even finding evidence of past life or even current life.
Whoa, finding alien life, that would be insane. But even if we don't find aliens, just understanding another planet could teach us so much about our own.
You got it. And all the technology we have to develop for Mars, it will have huge benefits for life on Earth, too. Think about advancements in energy, resource management, even medicine, all because we're trying to survive on another planet.
So it's not about escaping Earth, it's about learning how to live better, both here and on Mars.
That's it, exactly. And that brings us to another really important point. This isn't just a mission for one country. Getting to Mars is going to require global cooperation, kind of like the International Space Station, but on a way bigger scale.
Right, so this isn't about national pride, it's about all of humanity working together towards a common goal. That's actually pretty inspiring.
It really is. Even with all the differences we have here on Earth, the dream of reaching Mars shows that we can still come together and do something truly amazing.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The science, the challenges, the human side of a Mars colony. It's a lot to think about. But there's one thing we haven't really touched on yet. How has Mars, captured our imaginations here on Earth? It's not just about rockets and robots, is it?
No, you're right. Mars has been this source of fascination for us for centuries. It's inspired artists and writers and filmmakers. It's almost like a blank canvas where we can project all our hopes and fears.
Yeah, I get that. I remember reading those old sci-fi books about Martian civilizations as a kid and just feeling this sense of, wonder and possibility.
I think those stories really tap into something deep inside us, this curiosity about the unknown. But it's funny how our ideas about Mars have changed over time.
Well, what do you mean? I always thought of it as this symbol of exploration and adventure.
Well, not always. Ancient cultures, they saw Mars totally differently. The Romans, they named it after their god of war because it was red, like blood. It represented conflict and destruction.
Wow, that's pretty different from the new home for humanity thing we hear about today. So when did that change?
Well, once we invented the telescope back in the 17th century, that's when things started to shift. Astronomers could actually see Mars up close, which sparked a more scientific approach.
But the whole idea of life on Mars, that didn't really come about until much later, right? Wasn't there something about canals on Mars?
Oh, yeah, you're thinking of Giovanni Schiaparelli and his observations in the late 1800s. He made these sketches of what he thought were canals on Mars. And, well, people went kind of crazy with speculation about Martians building them.
Oh, yeah. And then there was Percival Lowell, right? He was convinced those canals were proof of a dying Martian civilization.
That's right. And even though those canals turned out to be just optical illusions, the whole thing really captured the public's imagination and inspired a ton of Martian science fiction.
It's amazing how a simple mistake could have such a big impact on our culture. So how did all this, Martian fever, show up in our culture?
Well, think about H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds, Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom series, Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles. All these books, they painted these incredible pictures of Mars with landscapes and societies, both beautiful and scary.
Yeah. And then those stories jump from books to movies and TV. I mean, who could forget the movie War of the Worlds or The Martian?
Those films and so many others, they really brought Mars to life on the screen. It solidified Mars's place in our minds.
And it's not just books and movies either. Music's been influenced by Mars, too. Think David Bowie's Life on Mars.
It's true. Mars has become this cultural touchstone for us. It's a symbol of our dreams, our fears of what's out there, and our search for meaning in the universe.
It's kind of poetic when you think about it. This one planet that represents so many different parts of what it means to be human.
It is. And, as we keep exploring Mars, who knows what new stories and ideas will come up. It's this constant back and forth between science and art. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Every new discovery opens up new ways to be creative. It's pretty exciting to think about.
It really is. And that feeling, that sense of wonder and possibility, it's what pushes us to explore, to push the boundaries of what we know and what we think is even possible.
Well said. I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've talked about so much: the scientific challenges, the ethical questions, the cultural impact of Mars. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it has. We've really explored not just Mars itself, but our own dreams for the future, too.
Exactly. And hopefully we've given our listeners a better understanding of why we're so drawn to Mars, the challenges we have to face, and all the incredible work that's going into actually making this happen. Who knows? Maybe someday some of our listeners will be the ones setting foot on Mars.
The future is definitely wide open. And as we've seen, the journey to Mars is already changing our world in amazing ways.
So to all our listeners out there, keep looking up at the stars, keep asking those big questions, and keep dreaming big. Because that spirit of exploration, that desire to get to Mars, that's the same spirit that will lead us to new discoveries and new possibilities right here on Earth and beyond. Thanks for joining us.